In today's video, I'm going to show you my favorite tank build for The Elder Scrolls Online. Some players may overlook the two-hand skill line when building a tank, but it's one of the best ways to get an AoE taunt for your character. Of course, proper tanking in ESO is more than just aggro control. If you want to impress your party and maximize group damage, then you're going to need more than just a taunt. Pull abilities to stack enemies and maximize AoE damage, reach abilities to shred those enemy resistances, maim abilities to reduce incoming enemy damage. But for me, that AoE taunt is a must-have as well. By the end of this video, you'll know which sets to collect and which skills to slot in order to build your very own two-hand tank character and make your daily dungeon roulettes a breeze. Let's jump into it. Welcome back, heroes of Tamriel. I'm Cal, and today I'm going to be sharing all of the details on my two-handed samurai tank build for The Elder Scrolls Online. This build strays a bit from tradition, but it's incredibly fun and effective. I've used it to successfully navigate some of the toughest content in the game. I actually managed to make my way through the veteran lair of Marsalok while filming this video. Shout out to Nex for those sweet heals, and a couple of resurrections because I am really bad at blocking one-shot heavy attacks. So let's get into the general gameplay. This build is designed to provide all the tools that you need for your tanking toolkit, along with the rare AoE taunt. For those new to the game, ESO doesn't give you much of a tanking toolkit by default. No AoE taunt, not much in the way of AoE crowd control, no pull-in abilities that make it easier to stack up enemies, and you're probably going to feel some pressure to stick with the traditional one hand and shield as your primary weapon selection. But that's boring, and ESO allows you to play your way, so let's talk about what you can use to build your two-hand tanking toolkit. You can unlock an AoE taunt by collecting 5 pieces of the Tormentor set in the Banished Cells dungeon. This is actually one of the earliest dungeons in the game, and you can collect the pieces in either normal or veteran mode, so you can start collecting very early on. Then, every class can access an AoE pull by collecting the Void Bash one hand and shield set from Vateshran Hollows. This set is a little bit tougher to come by, given that Vateshran is a solo arena, but it is well within reach for any player with just a little bit of practice and a decent build. You can complement this kit with skills from the Fighters Guild, the Undaunted, and the Assault skill lines. That will give you more things to do during a fight than just reapplying those taunts. With this build, you'll be leaping into combat, stacking up enemies, shredding their armor, and setting up your party to maximize their damage, all while feeling way more impactful and giving yourself multiple avenues to replenish your own combat resources, which will make your performance less dependent on an optimized party. The best tank is the one who can make even inexperienced DPS and absent-minded healers look like pros. Now, this particular version of the build does use some Templar skills, but you should be able to make this work with any class, as the key abilities aren't really class specific. So let's talk a little bit about the skills. On my front bar, I have slotted Stampede, that is from the two-hand skill line, Puncturing Sweep from the Templar skill line, although you could easily swap in another two-hand skill, Reverse Slice from the two-handed skill line, Overflowing Altar from the Undaunted skill line, and Repentance, another Templar skill, but there are plenty of options here that give you sort of that either resource replenishment or another AoE buff and heal combo. On the back bar, I'm using Pierce Armor from the one-handed skill line, Reverberating Bash from the one-handed skill line, Silver Leash from the Fighters Guild, Caltrops from Assault, and Extended Ritual. Again, Extended Ritual is an easy one to swap out. It is from the Templar skill lines, but there are plenty of other AoE heals and buffs available in the game. All right, let's talk a little bit about the set pieces that I am using. I mentioned Tormentors earlier. That is going to give you some max health, additional healing taken, but the real reason we're using this set is for that 5-piece bonus, and it will turn Stampede into a 15-second AoE taunt and grant you some additional resistance. Beyond Tormentor, I am using the Crimson Twilight set. That's going to give you additional max health, additional healing taken, and every 8 seconds you deal bleed damage to nearby enemies and heal for 100% of the damage done. That effect scales off your max health, making it great for tanks. Next, we're using Lady Thorns as our monster set, so a little bit of max health, but I am really using it here for that 2-piece ability. Casting an ability that costs health creates a Blood Ball synergy that you can use to deal disease damage to nearby enemies, applies major maim, and that will reduce their damage by 10%. But it also means that you are creating a synergy that you can use for yourself, and with the passive from the Undaunted skill line, you are now replenishing your own resources. Finally, we've got the Void Bash set on the back bar. This set adds an AoE pull to Power Bash and its morphs, which pulls all enemies within 12 meters to you and applies major maim as well. Now, I do like to keep an alternate set in my bag for tougher pulls, and that is the Plague Doctor. So just 5 pieces of that to swap in for Tormentors if the need arises, and that's basically just going to jack up your max health. Alright, let's talk about the Mundus stone, food, and potion. I prefer to go with the Lord as my Mundus stone for the HP boost. We're using multiple abilities on this build that output damage based on your character's max health, one of which returns healing based on that damage dealt, and it never hurts to have a larger HP pool in ESO as a tank. You have plenty of flexibility for the food, but I happen to be sitting on a massive stockpile of crown fortifying meals, and we're using a combination of magicka and stamina abilities for this build, plus we get more max health from those crown chickens, so getting that boost to all three attributes is ideal. You'll probably want to use tripots for your potion to maximize regen efficiency for similar reasons. Now let's talk about the race attributes and champion points. Race doesn't really matter in ESO, so I do always recommend going with what you like. This is even more so the case for tanking, where a few extra stat points one way or another is going to be completely unnoticeable. For attributes, I do recommend putting all 64 into health. For the champion points, we'll talk just about the warfare for a second. I like to go with Ironclad, Duelist Rebuff, Unassailable, and Reaving Blows. It's total overkill for standard dungeons, so feel free to swap out other champion skills if you see fit, but I do like having a little extra defense for tougher content. Alright, time to talk about the rotation and general combat strategy. Now, there is no cooldown on that Tormentor proc, which means that you can Stampede as often as you like to reapply Taunt and refresh the Tormentor resistance buff. I like to start out each pull by launching myself into the fray, targeting the biggest baddie in the group, and letting Tormentor taunt any nearby enemies. I will immediately switch to the back bar so that I can use Reverberating Bash to trigger Call of the Void from the Void Bash set. This is going to pull nearby enemies into a stack and applies Major Maim like I mentioned earlier, reducing their damage dealt. Once the adds are grouped up, I'll go ahead and drop Caltrops on them to help keep them stacked and apply Major Breach to those adds. At this point, you should have most of the pull stacked up, snared, taunted, and suffering from both Major Breach and Major Maim. Before bar swapping again to get back to the two-hand, I will go ahead and use Pierce Armor on the main baddie to apply Minor Breach as well, and then I will use Silver Leash to clean up any remaining adds that happen to be out of range of Call of the Void. Silver Leash is going to pull them into the stack as well. You can also drop Extended Ritual or whatever you're using in the 5 slot on your back bar for some extra AoE healing or buffs just to take the pressure off of your healer. After switching back to the front bar, it should be just about time to drop your Overflowing Altar. That's going to apply minor lifesteal to any enemies around you, and it's going to trigger the Lady Thorn monster set. Major Maim from Call of the Void only lasts for 10 seconds, and we can actually reapply it during the Void Bash cooldown by triggering the Lady Thorn's Blood Ball synergy, which is spawned when we use Overflowing Altar. Activating the Blood Ball synergy should also refresh some of your resources like I mentioned earlier, and at this point, it's really just a matter of reapplying taunts and debuffs while spamming Puncturing Sweep, or whatever you have in the second slot on your front bar, until the main target is under 50% health, and then you're swapping to Reverse Slice to help cleave down the enemies. Just be sure to throw out another rotation of Stampede, Pierce Armor, and Caltrops, and then of course either Reverberating Bash or Overflowing Altar, plus the Blood Ball synergy, every 12 seconds or so to refresh those taunts and debuffs. As with any tank build, you should have one of your weapons enchanted with the Crusher enchant with Infused for the trait. I keep my spammables on the front bar, so I have Crusher on my two-hand weapon. For my one-hand back bar, I actually use Life Drain and Defending, and that allows me to proactively switch to the back bar if I need to block some heavy attacks from a boss. Just a little extra boost of defense and healing. Now, I've found this strategy to work in almost every situation, but if you do happen to come across a pull where you don't really need that AoE taunt, or you're just struggling to survive in a specific encounter, maybe there's a boss that's hitting really hard, or you just don't have quite enough HP to soak whatever damage you feel you need to soak, I recommend swapping out your Tormentor pieces for the Plague Doctors. That's going to give you another 5,200 plus HP, which should push you up to about 60,000 total health. I personally use the Dressing Room add-on, which makes this extremely easy. With Dressing Room, you can save loadouts and then set hotkeys to switch gear sets with a single keystroke. Now that we've covered all of the combat details, I'm sure you'd also like to know what motifs and dyes I'm using for this character's outfit. While there are a number of samurai-inspired motifs in ESO, I really love the Akaviri Potentate motif. Sadly, this is a Crown Store exclusive, so it's difficult to come by, but you could always swap in some of the standard Akaviri stuff. I usually keep my helm hidden, but it is Moongrave. The belt is Fang Lair. Leggings are actually Ancestral Akaviri, boots are Glenmorrow Weird, and the two-hand is another Crown Store exclusive. I'm using the Ebony Blade for my two-hand sword, but you could easily swap in Soul Shriven for a non-Crown Store katana. My one-hand and shield are Crimson Oath. The dyes I'm using for this outfit are Atmarin Bronze, Liar's Linen, and Cold Harbor Ash black. If you want to get this particular look for your Khajiit, the collectibles I'm using are the Ghost Goblin face and body war paints. That's it for the build, but before I wrap up this guide, I do want to give a quick shout out to my patrons, whose financial support helps me keep the lights on around here. If you'd like to join the crew and gain access to some bonus content, be sure to hit that link on screen now. If you happen to be new around here and you'd like to see some more ESO content, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you all for checking out today's video. I normally spend my days furnishing houses in ESO, but every now and then I like to share something else that I've been working on. And this happens to be one of my favorite combat builds that I've put together for the Elder Scrolls Online. I do hope this little guide helps you create a build that will allow you to enjoy tanking in ESO as much as I do nowadays. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and call it there. Bye for now, everybody.